Hello everyone. And there was some link in the chat. Was that the agenda? Okay, cool. Um, so by way of a little bit of introduction, I'm Langdon White. Catherine, have you introduced yourself already?
Not yet. We were waiting for you, and then we were going to start, but then it worked. So we're just
Gotcha. All right, so I'm Langdon White. I'm a clinical assistant professor at Boston University. I also kind of contribute to a website called Kube by Example, and host a live stream show where I interview people inside Kubernetes land. I used to work for Red Hat, and so it's actually kind of by way of that relationship. And so every month, basically, I interview people. And I met Catherine because I started doing in Motor City in Detroit when KubeCon was there, interviewing people in a car while driving around. And in Amsterdam, Catherine was one of the people that I interviewed, and that was kind of how we met. And I'll let her introduce herself, and then we'll kind of do kind of more formal introductions.
awesome. Yeah. So yeah, it's funny how things work. So we met in Amsterdam, and I also initiated one of the deaf and hard of hearing working group. And one of the things that we wanted to do is kind of also reach out or have like resources for higher education institutions that are focused on deaf and hard of hearing. And then we were like, the whole thing kind of like the idea came out is like, well, it would be great to have something that they could use, but of course it's not only for deaf and hard of hearing. All these universities could use that. And so I was like, oh, I met this professor, right? And then I reached out to, and we had that conversation. And so I started right with why, but yeah, my name is Catherine. I work at Buoyant, the creator of Linkerd, and have been in open source like 3 years, probably not as long as a lot of people here on the call. And yeah, and I'm very excited about this initiative because I think it can really like making high quality educational material available for anyone everywhere, no matter how many resources the university has, is super powerful. And we're seeing always like the same, like, but that's like the problem we always see, like always the same people getting into the same space because the same role models are there. So we have to break that. We have to make it accessible so more people, so we get more diversity as well in tech. So very excited about the potential of this initiative. It's a lot of work, I know, but that shouldn't stop us. So we'll do that. The person who's introduced themselves picks the next, I guess, right? So I'll go with the first person that is on my screen, which is Justin.
Hi, so I'm Justin Kapos. I'm a professor at New York University. I created 2 CNCF projects, Tough and in Toto. I'm also TAG security tech lead for the security group inside of here, and created the assessment process that they use to do things. I have actually made educational materials that are used at a bunch of institutions for security mostly, although some use them for networking and operating systems. That have been used at everything from community colleges all the way up to Research One universities. So I'm interested to see what people are looking for and need.
You can pick next, or we could just go on. The other way we can do it is by the way people listed themselves and the attendees on the agenda.
Sure, I'll pick Corey to go next.
Oh, okay, thanks. My name is Corey Leong. I'm here in Orlando, Florida, and I teach AWS courses to undergraduates. I'm a professor of cloud computing. I used to work for Oracle, and while I was at Oracle, I developed training materials for our Oracle customers on OpenStack products, and also cloud native. So I have some experience already with the cloud native projects, and we're lacking open source training materials at our college. So I want to really introduce more open source projects, specifically in cloud computing, to my students, and that's the reason why I'm here. Besides, I think Ryan, or shout out to Ryan. He actually introduced me to this group. I think it was a couple of weeks ago. So I'll hand it over to. Can I hand it over to Ryan?
Yes, you can.
Yeah. Hey, Ryan.
I'm Maria. I am in South Africa, and I work for a company in New Zealand called II, and we do mostly conformance work for the CNCF. But other than that, I am the tech lead for tag contributor strategy, helping you with repos and all the administration to be able to do the tech. I've also been tech and open source for about 3.5 years now. And then I'll hand over to Jay.
Kia ora koutou, ko Jay Tupungwa. My name's Jay. I'm based in New Zealand. I work with Rian, actually, with a small company called II, and co-chair of the mentoring working groups, and have about another couple of working groups with the deaf and hard hearing, and work with Toikarawa, which is a Māori economic development agency here as well. So basically, I'm just working to create pathways into open source cloud. So I work with different education providers and local industry and local government and community organizations to try and raise awareness and accessibility into the space as well. So yeah, just keen to learn and help out where I can. A few familiar faces, which is awesome, and a few new ones too. So looking forward to connecting with you all. Go to Christophe.
Thank you. So my name is Christophe Sautier. I work for the CNCF. I am the training and certification lead for the CNCF. So as you can imagine, when I heard about this group this week by Ryan, I was quite excited, especially because the academic world is something that I plan to focus on at some point in the next few months. So really interested. My role is to define the next training, next certification, and all the environment around that we build within the CNCF. So I think it will be a nice thing to discuss with you. I can go with Nikita.
Hey, hi everyone. So I'm a software engineer at VMware. I'm also on the CNCF TOC. I'm a Kubernetes maintainer. I was also on the Kubernetes steering committee in the past. So I'm here for mainly two reasons. One, I'm also the KubeCon chair. So we're working on some initiatives that are not public yet. So I can talk a lot about it. But then I can collaborate more with academia for KubeCon Europe 2024, so in Paris. So I'm here to just kind of understand what you all are working on. And the other item is also, so I got started in the CNCF as an intern and as a student. So we really didn't have any open source or CNCF curriculums back then, and kind of had to do it all, learn it all by myself. So I'm really, really excited about this idea and just want to see this happen. So Madhav, do you want to go next?
Hi, my name is Madhav. I work with Nikita at VMware. I'm a tech lead for SIG contributor experience. And I'm mainly here because I've been following a lot of interesting research that's been happening around cloud native. And we had some, a little bit of cloud native back when I was a student, which was like a year ago. And that was like really amazing. Great exposure. So it's very exciting to see that this is actually happening at the CNCF level. And I'm excited to help out in whatever way I can.
Cool. I think that was everyone. Did we miss anybody? Cool. So the first thing I think kind of was, just to kind of ratify on the kind of agenda is first, does this meeting time work, for at least us? The nice thing about being early participants is we have some control over cadence and that kind of thing. I know there's no good time, but we figured, noon might be is reasonably accessible for at least Europe, West Coast, East Coast of the US. And obviously New Zealand, not so much. But is this kind of fine? And I just kind of wanted to get maybe a show of hands. Yes, sound good.
For me, it is good. It is 6 p.m. here, but for Jay, it's 4 a.m. So I would say it's maybe an hour or 2 hours, if possible.
I'll try to make as many as I can, but
Okay.
yeah. So we can go through it's cool.
Yeah, I like the consistency. I mean, one of the other tricks is to actually have it kind of bump back and forth. But it's also hard on memory. So it's kind of like maybe we try it for a while, see. Hopefully a lot of this work will be async. So we'll kind of see how it goes. So I kind of would propose let's just kind of stay where we are, and then and then we'll see how and invariably, I don't know, there's at least a couple other faculty members here, right? Is that next semester I may be teaching during this time on Thursdays, so we might have to kind of revisit the time, call it every semester. I know if working in industry, I spent 20 something years in industry. The cadence of academia is kind of weird, but every 3 months we sometimes have to change things anyway. So we can also call it revisited in December, and if we like something better. I don't know about because I think there were at least 2 other faculty members, right? I don't know how set your classes are, but mine are still pretty flux.
Actually, I was hoping to get account of that. So I'm a professor at NYU. You mentioned you teach. Do we have another faculty member here?
I thought, yeah, we had one more, Corey, right?
That's right, I am too.
Great, because part of what I'm mildly concerned about is we have 3 faculty, and out of a group of 9 people, and this mirrors a lot of what I've seen in KubeCons. There was an event for academics that I went to. It was a free lunch, and there were like 80 people there. And I walked around and polled everybody, and I found 2 other people who actually taught a class there. It was students, it was people from government, it was people who wished we had more academics, but we're just not. Like, one thing I think we have to be very aware of in this group is if we want to build materials that are used, we also have to do outreach to faculty. And there are a bunch of difficulties and techniques for doing that, but it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I think that's one of my big concerns as well. I know Catherine, it was one of her concerns too. One of the things that I think that academia doesn't mesh well to typical open source world is that normally kind of all academics work is grant funded. So one of the things that I definitely put in the kind of initial kind of founding document or whatever is that we need to go talk to the ACM, talk to CNCF, maybe even talk to industry providers about actually kind of structuring grants such that we can pay for faculty members' time as well as grad students, because I think what we want to try to do is treat this as an academic activity, which I think, Justin, to your point, right, will attract more faculty members because they'll be able to engage in a way that they're normally used to, and so that's kind of my hope. Plus straight up marketing, right? I mean, we started this in the summer. To some extent, the fact that we got 3 people who were paying attention in the summer who are faculty members, I think is actually a plus. So I'm hopeful that as we go through the next few weeks and basically as the semesters kick off, if we can kind of ramp up marketing, through just like social media, et cetera, we can also maybe attract some more people, especially if we make it clear that we're the leadership of the group is kind of coming from academia, and so kind of knows about the weirdness of working in academia. Does that make sense?
Yeah, let me let Catherine speak, and then I'll want to talk a little more.
Yeah. So yeah, one of the things is like when we had that idea, of course, is like it has to be faculty driven, right? We need different people to collaborate and so on for industry, but we need faculty. And as Landon mentioned, that is a little challenging. We try to kind of reach people in the summer. But one thing I think like the focus is like we have people who have created some stuff, let's gather that. But I think the focus that I would suggest is really like going in the next month and a half and say like, okay, recruitment mode, right? Like getting the word out. And then my background is in marketing, so I can help a little bit in that. We did that with the Deaf and Hard of Hearing initiative as well. We had like a coordinated social media campaign where different people post things, you know, we can schedule them like each week, one person says something personal, why they think that's important with links to the issue and so on. And then we ask the CNCF to post, to share as well, and kind of really try to get reach as many people as possible. And so we did find quite a few people, which is really nice, but I think it does need a little bit, as Landon mentioned, like some marketing effort before we can do that. And I think like we can start building the foundation, but I think the focus I would suggest is really getting more people on board. And then and I think we need the help from everyone, right? We need to coordinate a little bit. I know the Langton has been doing some social media, but it's like if it comes from different people, it would be great. And I'm happy to help kind of doing that if everyone kind of supports us and then posts something. So Justin.
Yeah, I think the challenges here are being underestimated from getting faculty to teach using materials. And this is like as someone who's, I know that the materials I've used have been used in like more than 100 classes at about like 30 universities. And for some of the time, the National Science Foundation was paying people to actually pilot and use materials from other people's classes as a way to try to encourage reuse. So this is with them, you know, for maybe 10 of the classes, like actually handing faculty members $5,000 or something to try materials that had already been built and had already been used. And one of the things that we found is you can't overestimate the skill level of the faculty, because oftentimes people at like smaller schools and things, they may have gotten their education 20 years ago and done a PhD in what was graphics at the time, right? And they've just been asked to teach more and more classes, and someone comes to them and says, you have to teach a cloud class. And they literally do not know what Docker is. They've never heard of cloud native. They might know the name Amazon, and they might know VMware, maybe not, and that's it. And so there's going to be people like that. And then there's going to be people at research universities that are pretty good, but they're doing like weird esoteric research in academia land that doesn't connect well with industry. And they would like some cool materials that actually connect well. And those are two very separate groups. If we want to reach the first group of people that aren't, you know, like if we want to go broad at a bunch of liberal arts schools and like four-year colleges and stuff like that, we can absolutely do it. But probably the best way to do it, at least from what I've found and what I've seen, is we need to do some of that. We need to find a few eager adopters, really incentivize them, and then get them to go to these regional conferences. They're called CCSC, and they're in different regions. And it's like a conference where all the people, all the educators from that region get together to talk about what happened. And they'll often present papers and teaching materials and stuff. And places like that or SIGSI are where the educators go. And getting that kind of like, you know, oh, Joe, who I've known for 10 years, used it in his class and says it's great. That's the thing that is going to make people do it, because it's a huge time investment for them. it's kind of a huge reputational risk. If they try it and it doesn't go well, they'll get really negative course evaluations, which can have all kinds of problems for them at the university. It's a much, much harder problem than I thought, like looking in from the outside initially when I started to try to get people to use materials like this, like 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, my experience is the same. And I teach at a big research university, right? And not only do the students not know what containers are, they often don't really understand what a virtual machine is or why that matters. And they're, some of the top flight faculty members in the entire world are teaching in the computer science departments here, right? But as you say, I think when you made the remark earlier, I was thinking of a particular guy who's working specifically on addressing, modification of FPGAs in cloud computing environments. Right. This is very research. Right. It is very not what anybody's really doing. There is some overlap. Right. Some related work they're doing is actually how do you connect multiple clouds together, because Google and Amazon have no interest in that feature. But like research universities want to be able to connect their data centers together in cloudy ways, right? So some of that is kind of interesting. But yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think we need to figure out, I think basically it's kind of like we need kind of the materials, but then for liberal arts college, I went to Siena College, for crying out loud, right? It's a small 4-year liberal arts school that is a teaching school. And, for them to adopt it, I need a class to teach the faculty member who can then in turn teach the class, right? So I think we're going to need that backup material to kind of just educate the faculty members themselves about what they need to teach. And then kind of related, I think your point is a really good one of like we need to use kind of word of mouth marketing channels to get, if we can incentivize some early adopters, particularly at places where you wouldn't expect to find them, so community colleges, small liberal arts colleges, if we can incentivize some of those faculty members to first take the training class, right, and then actually teach the class, then hopefully we can get some snowball effect there. And I think, and I mentioned ACM kind of broadly, but yeah, SIG, I think there's actually at least 2 SIGs that might be interested in being involved in this. And there's a new initiative actually that's a collaboration between the ACM and IEEE, specifically around I want to say it's even cloud computing education that I kind of came across. And so I think I don't think we'd have that much trouble getting the funding. I think we might have, obviously there's grant writing and all that, rigmarole, but we still have to have somebody who wants to take the money, which is risky, right? So yeah, 100% agree. But I'm not sure, it's kind of a chicken and egg problem for me. Like, how do we kind of go try to develop the material? Do we try to develop the early adopters? Do we try to develop the group first? It's kind of like I know how to build a curriculum, and in some ways I think having something to shop around, like a rough idea of a syllabus with like learning outcomes and and at least titles for assignments and lectures and that kind of stuff might be something to kind of say, here, this is what we're doing, and kind of use that as a lever to go talk to various organizations about how to get people to consume it. I presume Catherine and Justin, you put your hands up to weigh in, but I'm not sure who went first.
Justin was first for sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, one thing that might be a good strategy that I've used before and found effective is make something that can just be done in a single class period in 20-30 minutes that is so simple that, imagine you have a non-technical, parent like your mom or your dad or somebody's not very technical, that they could run it and they could do it. And you just do that as a one-off. You just do that as a one-time thing that they can do in a class that shows some really interesting concept. and is super simple. And then that gets your foot in the door and makes you credible and everything else. And you can see appetite for that, and you can build your network out. And that doesn't require a lot of the other things or uptake. You know, does that make sense? I think that strategy might be more effective than trying to like say, oh, here's the class we want to build. Who's going to sign up to come here for, you know, to take it, and we'll pay you a stipend to do it, or whatever else. I think it just might be more effective to have a single one class module.
Catherine, did you want to add to that point, or?
Not to that point, but like I love that idea to go small, and then but I think, Justin, before you mentioned as well like conferences, so I think like that is a really good approach, having something, maybe that small thing or like that class, and then the one-off, and then like an idea of what it could be, and then to go to those conferences and present that, because like it could be like a lot of people would be too much. They just don't want to change things. It's just fine the way it is, right? You always have that kind of people, but you also have the people, the innovators, right? And so if you have like a room full of faculty, there must be people who think this is really great, because like it is a great idea, and it will position their students much more strongly on the market once they finish their studies. So I'm sure there is a group that will see that benefit, right? So having something like, I mean, the social media one is something we can start right away. I think doing something small that we can share so people have an idea what it is, and then try to go to conferences and recruit there would be awesome, I think.
Yeah, and we can certainly do it. It does take some time. I mean, even if we had done something already and wanted to publish it, it might be 6 months before it's time for us to actually go to the conference. But this is, I think, at least what I've found to be the most effective way. And I've done this like, I don't know, 5 or 6 times or something like it. So it's definitely very doable. It just requires us to put something good together and do some work.
Yeah, so my secondary appointment in at BU is as the technical director for an organization called Spark, which is experiential learning, you know, and kind of enabling projects for third parties with students. And we have this concept of these like micro challenges, which is kind of, you know, maybe kind of sort of similar to what you're talking about. It's like, you know, yeah, if we can put together some piecemeal components, you know, that have, you know, no cost entry point, you know, has a demonstrable thing that you can kind of do in lecture, but maybe have the students kind of follow along, you know, in some way. Like I tend to teach with Jupyter notebooks, right? And I give out the partial version, right? And then I live fill it in because I just want to taunt the demo gods every other day. But you know, something along those lines, I think that's a great idea. And I think it's very kind of doable if we kind of had a rough idea of like, okay, you know, we have unit, you know, K, right? And unit, you know, F, and, you know, and then eventually we kind of can put all the units together and then turn that into, you know, like a class. But in the meantime, you know, in the near term, we can kind of just say, okay, here's a piece that you could just use once, right? And then here's another one that you might also like, right? Maybe even just kind of have like a catalog of those. The other really serious upshot to doing something like that is it's very parallelizable, right? Like we could have a whole bunch of random people kind of working on those individual things, as long as we had a rough structure for what they look like. Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
I'll show you, so I'll give you an example of one that I did before. This is more than 10 years old, and the like infrastructure for it isn't running, so you can't actually go through and do it, but it might give you an idea of what this looks like. This is basically just a really simple thing where people went and they were able to acquire virtual machines around the world and then run like a really simple ping program across them. And what they would find if they did this a few times is they would find non-transitive connectivity, which is where you had 2 computers A and B that couldn't talk, but they could both talk to computer C. And because there's some kind of routing problem on the internet or some filtering or something else happening that's causing this to occur. and it didn't require any programming from the students. It was really simple to do. And like we had this used many times. So this is just a thought exercise. And if you go pop up a directory, you can see there's actually a whole bunch of exercises that were created in this framework doing different things that like different instructors use. You can look at different examples of like what something like this might look like if you want a if you want something concrete to glance at that is a place we might go or might think of going.
One of the
Yeah.
things that I've been working on that may be useful in this area is I used to be the director of IT for Texas Tech University, helping the some of the AI group there and some of the professors and students to have the infrastructure necessary for their courses and their doctorate work. And one of the things that you have to make simple is the ability to bring it up and have it take a life of its own. And so that was, I don't know, roughly 20 years ago. And since then, I've been trying to simplify bringing up, and I just call it instant infrastructure, where we have something like a bootable USB stick or something that can be downloaded and or an image that's loaded. And when you boot this up, the ability to have a working domain name that's allocated and a working ingress so that the services and things that we can think of to create are instantly available. And also the ability to create new subdomains and accounts for each of the people who are interested in trying to get on the same page together. And also creating things like Jupyter notebooks and other stuff that is allows us to not only explore ideas that others have already created, but instantly boot them up and use infrastructure at our university or at our laptops connected in the hallway to use things like VNC from Cambridge. So I'll drop a link. I'm actually not at my desk. I'm actually traveling through London at the moment, but I'll drop a link to an instance we have running here in the UK. And I'd love to hear some of the software and infrastructure and maybe some of the projects that anyone on this call is using so that I can bring up some examples of these shared environments so that we can get on the same page together. Sometimes literally creating a dynamic domain for a particular project that if we all 10 of us got on the same page together, we'd all be seeing the same virtual computer in the cloud and working on it together.
Yeah, I like the one of the ways that we used to do something similar to that at Red Hat, for example, was using although they don't exist anymore, like Katacoda, where you kind of have your instructions kind of on the left, right? And then you have like a sort of running virtual machine or container or something on the right. And so the students can, just kind of like, follow along while using a kind of a real actionable environment. But it's kind of like your opening in your example, Justin, right? It's like you don't have to have that step of make sure Python is installed, right? It's just kind of like it's all set up for you already. We're noticing, at least here, right, we're noticing like we're having increasing problems with that kind of step with all the ARM laptops that are coming in. So for example, Windows ARM and trying to get Rust compilers is actually very difficult. So I think those kind of pre-configured environments for running these, I think both to your earlier point of like low barrier to entry for the faculty member as well as for the students is really, really important.
And you will have it go all the way down to, I had someone who said they tried to use my materials, but they didn't, they said IP in it and they didn't know what IP was. And they were confused and just gave up. Things like that. Like you talk about IP address, what the heck is this thing? And I'm thinking like, I don't know, maybe you shouldn't be teaching networking, but if your university puts you in that position, we'd like to have materials for it. So I honestly think the first thing we need to do is find something really compelling and pedagogically compelling that we can target, and then we can make like a one-off module for it. And then we pilot it with a few people that are at, I would prefer we go kind of even at the lower end of the pool for what we will eventually want to target, and see how they react to it. And then we refine it. Because that's really what happens is you refine it, you add more and more, you get a question that you thought no person would ever ask and add it in there. You know, I think, but having that thing that people are going to learn that's important as a concept is a prerequisite. If you just are like, here's a cool thing you can do with, like, you know, this vendor's cloud, then instructors also won't pick that up usually.
Yeah, lead with learning outcomes, you know. I definitely agree. Do you have any ideas what that is? I mean, one thing that I find particularly kind of interesting to teach that I think a lot of students don't really understand, but I don't know if everyone else kind of would agree, is like why containers exist. And quickly, you know, kind of in the abstract of like, you know, we had these physical machines, but we couldn't get density, right? And then we did virtual machines and we had density, but there was a lot of overhead. So then we went to containers, which now have better density with a lot less overhead, but a trade-off where you can't use certain features of the kernel. Sorry, Rian, did you have a comment or ideas?
As a very new person to open source and to tech, I am very fresh to the barriers to entry. And so what I've done is, a while back, I wrote a whole how to get started in open source document, because we realized even in the open source community, there's people, the basics of what is GitHub, why GitHub, how to use a repo, what on earth is a fork and why do you want to do that, which is absolute basic blocks for anybody to get involved. And I had a nice experience yesterday with the deaf and hard of hearing working group. There's somebody that want to contribute, but she does not know, she can create the content, but she have no idea how to get it into GitHub. So we're going to have another class. Basically, I'm teaching now one-on-one, which is a very expensive way of propagating it. One-on-one, teaching people how to get onto GitHub, how to do basic work that is industry related. And another very good example that we have, there's an intern that worked with Jay. She's a university student. I'm not sure exactly what level she's at now, but since she started with us, she absolutely developed into a force to be reckoned with amongst students, and going with Jay to schools, teaching kids what she learned in a few short months of working with us on technological entry points. And I think that's quite the thing to behold, to see how, if you just teach them the first few steps, they get into that. And then an example of when you talked about getting kids into containers, one of the questions I always ask is, why would I do it and what's the problem I'm solving? And my kids are busy learning about containers through home automation. They have no idea why they want a container, what's a container for, until I said, okay, we're going to do a home automation. Here's a server for you, figure it out. And from YouTube and all sorts of free tutorials, they are beyond me now with containers, mapping containers, visualizing the containers in a space. So I find doing practical things is actually an extraordinary helpful teaching tool, even at the lowest level.
Yeah, I just want to jump in quickly on that. So yeah, as Rian mentions, we're introducing some of that to schools now, and I mean the curiosity for students in general around new technologies is pretty easy to speak to. Like, they're just curious, they want to do something different. And if you can talk about how, you know, at the moment some of those things like GitHub is used in the real world, it's a pretty easy sell for teachers and everyone to get on board too. But we've just delivered a first Indigenous data conference with been co-developing at one of the universities recently, and it was more to the problem that we're looking to address, as opposed to the technology itself, which we found pretty effective to be a draw card. And one of the issues that is becoming really big in New Zealand at the moment is around data sovereignty and how to protect Indigenous data. So that was really easy to, start. As we mentioned before, things like virtual machines and Docker and all the rest of it is literally a new language for people. But if you could communicate it more in terms of, well, here's a bit of a common concern, and here's some of the technologies and things around that. And it was like a 4-day conference, but it's only a very superficial level. We were talking about Māori data science and AI, and touching on things like cloud technologies, and perhaps the idea of introducing local data servers and things like that. If there was some sort of MVP that was built around that, as you said, Justin, with having like a smaller project that can introduce in some way, I think they'd have really big uptake. Some of the feedback from some of the attendees there was like, this is awesome, and it's opened up my eyes to things. And now what is the next step? What is something that I can take away back to where I come from? What's something that the teaching staff themselves might be able to introduce or implement too? So, but this is, as I said, this is part of a larger growing, sort of national conversation as well. So I think if it's a clearly defined problem, you can start introduce people to what that looks like first, and then sort of start talking about some of the technologies and things. I think it's a lot easier for people to want to grasp and go, okay, this is just another piece of that puzzle that I'm learning as I go, as opposed to like, now there's Docker, now there's VMs or whatever else, and adding that away. So just think about your comment before about the compelling motivation or whatever it is, might be to get them into that. So yeah, cheers.
So coming back, or rather continuing on point of how to best curate curriculum for cloud native. This was my experience with whatever little cloud native was there back when I was a student, and I also tried to convince more people to introduce more of it. The biggest barrier was when I pitched it as like a separate course in itself. There was a huge pushback. That's extremely difficult to do. But what was conducive to them was that introducing it as part of existing courses really helped. So we had cloud native exposure as part of existing courses. So operating systems, cloud computing, if that's a core course, or if it's something like an elective, that helped. So containers and stuff like that is a very natural progression from things you teach in operating systems, for example. And like the point about conferences, I think that's a great idea. There are local conferences by IEEE and things like that happen in Bangalore. Folks of organizers I'm in touch with almost regularly. Some of them are my previous professors as well. And these conferences usually have special tracks for professors to get to know what's the latest out there and share ideas around improvements in curriculum. So if at all we can get like just a small thing, a small presentable thing out to sort of pitch to these people, I think they would be very open to the idea of having an extension to existing courses rather than spinning up something new altogether. At least that's what's worked with me in the past, and it's been a good experience so far with in that line of work, at least.
Yeah, I think Madhav has a great point there. And I want to just kind of go back for a sec to Langdon's example about like, why are containers needed? I think like this is a really good illustration of a concept, and it's one that like in the intro security slides I have also, and I also put like things like programming language VMs in there, and talk about different types of virtualization and how LXC works different from like VMware Server and VMware Workstation, how they're all like quite distinct and so on. But one of the things that I think we also need to think about is how are the students going to learn better by seeing you actually run copies of this, if that's the goal, or how are the learning outcomes going to improve? Because it's one of these things that we actually, did study and found that when students went and actually deployed these little programs, that then their simple ping programs would find non-transitive connectivity, they understood it much better. And we were able to show, like in testing, like measurable improvement. And so that's another thing that for these communities, they're going to want to see, for us to go and sell it. It can't just be like, hey, we have this cool thing, you should try it. It has to be, students learn better when they see X firsthand and when they use these materials.
Yeah, like +1. I mean, yeah, if you, if there's a story in it, right, it really does make a huge difference to capturing it. Catherine?
Yeah, since we only have 9 minutes left, I was wondering, should we just do like what are the next steps? So I know like identifying a topic, I think doing the social media thing is like a parallel thing that we should do either way, just because we need to raise awareness and like just like so we know what to do and organize a little bit and don't wait until the next meeting for something to happen.
I would, I mean, this might be a crazy opinion. I'll just throw it out there and apologies, but I would avoid doing anything social until we figure out what we're doing. Because I think the problem we have now isn't we have a good thing and we want to scale it up and out. It's that I think we don't know what the right thing to do is. If we need to bring in people to do that, we need to figure out which people we need, and then we can try to reach out and probably get them in the room. But I don't think right now our problem is one just of like turning the crank to grow the group.
So I kind of agree, except I disagree with your premise. Personally, I'm convinced in the sense that I think it would be a really good idea to develop, let's say, 2 or 3 of these modules, whatever we end up calling them, right, that we target as like capsules that we would give to an existing class, to Madhav's point, right, of, we know there's an operating systems class at every university, right? We know there's probably something like a cloud computing class at every university. So if we kind of come up with, like I said, 2 or 3 different capsules that we could then inject right into the kind of offer up to those classes, and then and so I think that makes sense to me of kind of what we are doing, and what I think we would what I would like to agree on first is like, okay, let's figure out what those 3 are, even if we haven't really done the work to produce them, but we have a good idea of, I would say, like a title and the learning outcome. And if we have kind of those for 2 or 3 that we're happy with, then we could go do the marketing, right? Like, I think that would be enough to say, hey, we have these 3 things that we want to build. What do you think? What kind of tweak would it take to get you to put this into your cloud computing class or whatever? And that might be enough to crank up the engine, and start from there. And then, like I was kind of saying earlier, is like, and if we kind of build enough of those units, maybe eventually we get to an actual syllabus and one whole semester long class, or we kind of keep doing those pieces and then kind of see what happens. But I think that's we can kind of wait and see on that part of it. Justin?
So I will just want to politely say one more thing, and then I promise I'll shut up about this, and whatever the group decides is what the group decides. But a lot of these people we will get one shot with.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're not ready when they come to us the first time, they won't look again, possibly period, but at least not for many years unless they hear from many, many other people. So I do think we want at least something that is completely shovel ready before we drag in traffic, even if it's only one module that they can try and do themselves in 20 minutes and watch a YouTube video to see somebody else how they did it in a class. That would be enough. But I don't think we want to like bring them with a promise that at some point in the future, if they just keep coming back, will have something because they may just tune out forever. Just my feeling.
So I don't disagree with you at all. I would say there's a distinction between the group of people who we want to contribute to it and the group of people we want to consume it. Right. So the contributors, I think we have a little bit more latitude with. But yeah, as far as consumers,
I think we can personally reach out to people then. I don't think we want to do like broad social media pull to try to get random people to be contributors. I don't think that's going to be effective. So I think we should figure out what we want to do. And then if we need to target people, we can. But once again, whatever the group decides is fine.
All right. So I don't know, take a vote kind of thing. But I'm inclined, like I said, I that's actually why I hesitated on kind of initiating the group until like I felt like that initial kind of outreach document was complete. So I kind of agree. I think the only challenge is that I think going after some more individual contributor faculty members is important. So I think if we know enough people that we can get at least another couple, if not more than that, to really get some other perspectives, that would be helpful. So hopefully we can do it via networking. But failing that, we might have to make a different decision. So I don't know kind of how to go about this. Do we want to kind of say, I don't know, take a vote on, do we feel like the kind of capsule idea is the right first approach?
Personally, I don't want to make a decision for a faculty-driven initiative because I don't know, like there are 3 people here who know how they tick because that's your crowd. So whatever approach you think is best, I think I would go with that. And I would hope that everyone else who is not really faculty would agree. I don't know. So we have 3 people. And I don't know, we can also just try to see how far we go, right? Like I know that I've reached out to some people in Europe because we have a few end users there, and to say like, hey, do you have still contact to your university? Do you know any professors? Someone came back from Norway and said like they're super theoretical. That's not gonna work. So it's like just depends. Some countries are very theoretical and some are more practical. So we could try that and then see how far we go, or like. And I also think like it just depends how the social media post is, right? It's like we have this thing. We don't have to be saying like we have this thing, come join us. It's like we are looking for contributors so it's like I think like it just depends how we frame it. If we're saying we have this new initiative, this is our goal, we need people who are willing to do the work, is that you? That will not attract. I mean, it will be clear for someone who will just want to consume it. That's not them. So. But again, these are my thoughts.
I think that's a good point, Catherine. I think if it's framed correctly, maybe it's fine. But and I do think if we create one of these modules, it's not going to be wasted. Like we're never going to regret having made a couple of modules and having something to show. Also, I mean, there's no way anybody's going to use any of this for the fall semester. So it's not like we have a tight timeline for things. Realistically, most faculty who adopt things for new classes are looking in the summer. So we have almost a year to get things together. And I think that's the sort of timeline we should be thinking about because they're going to be too busy in the fall to look at new stuff for the spring. Just speaking from experience working with these educational groups and educators.
Yeah, and just one more thing, I did share that link. So there is something hosted by the Linux Foundation that is AI driven, that is also like a curriculum, whatever. So that's something that early on in the discussion, when I mentioned that to someone, they were like, oh, look at this. And was like, so we're not creating something completely new. And I got 2 contacts of people who are working on that. So something that we should do probably is like reach out to them and say like, how did you do this? What are the challenges? What, like, I don't know, maybe the three of the faculty here, like one of, you know, like, yeah, just talk. We should talk to them and ask them about their experience.
Well, I think content is going to fall out of the woodwork all over the place. You know, because there's, you know, one of the kind of sort of in reverse of your earlier point, Justin, about the, you know, NSF trying to like get more collaboration going. You know, it's that faculty members tend to be very siloed, right? And a lot of them have produced really good material, but just no one is, and they're perfectly happy to share it. Nobody knows it exists. So I think there's also, you know, it's kind of like Catherine, you were saying about how we frame the question is also like, if we kind of are like, hey, you know, this is what we're trying to build. If you have prior art, we'd love to see it. You know, and either via that mechanism or directly, you know, if we come across it, right, directly reaching out and asking about it, I think is a good idea. All right, so we really are at time. So what do we want to say for next steps? Is this an email conversation, a Slack conversation, should we have another one-off meeting between, you know, now and kind of the end of the month, or, you know, is that you know, just kind of say, hey, here's some you know, actual actions.
I'd like
So
to,
I just had one thought. Oh, sorry, someone else.
I think
I'd just like to offer my time to any of the faculty that'd like to spend some time, that I can take your current ideas and make them an executable click instant infrastructure thing, so we can have some examples that are with the people who are in the room to show different ways of thinking, even with our first three. I'm not talking the actual curriculum or anything else, just trying to cross-pollinate from different people who are in that space, so that the vocabulary can be shared amongst us all with the people who are the focus of the domain. And just reach out to me on Slack.
So just one thing I wanted to call out or just bring back is regarding the curriculum and the content. Maybe it's worth, since we have 3 faculty already on this call, I'm assuming a couple more interested who haven't been able to join. Maybe it's worth sort of just penning down a few rough ideas about what would make a good few ideas to incorporate into existing courses, and then float that by your fellow professors and just sort of gather feedback about, okay, what do you think? Would this be something that you would want to teach in your class? And then work off of that till we get to a good enough stage. Once we are at a good enough stage, make it a little more formal, send it across externally to your university, another university, things like that. And once we are at a good stage, we can then form like that small module that we were talking about. But I think just to get started, it would be helpful to pen down a few ideas. And it's also important to like keep in mind that those few ideas that we pen down also should be a good foray into what cloud native actually is. And like, it shouldn't be too catered to that particular existing course. It should be catered to that course and to cloud native, because that's the whole point.
I think we need to move this to Slack just being so I think like why don't we think about, like we just discussed on Slack, I think like every 2 weeks would be awesome at the beginning, just to make progress, so we don't wait a month again, but maybe that's like too much time for everyone. So why don't we just decide that on Slack and then think about the ideas, unless
I like it. And I think Christoph raised a good point in the chat about the you know, the timeline of academia, right? It's to Justin's point, right? It's so weird. You know, we got to be really careful that we don't set expectation in the industry community that we you know, that we're going to be ready sooner than we are. You know, because if we're going to target, you know, I would agree with, you know, targeting early summer would be really useful, because I think you might get some adoption. But yeah, let's call it there, and you know, maybe try to set some time up for, you know, a couple of weeks from now, but we can do it in Slack. Yeah,
awesome, great first meeting. So
yeah, thank you all, really appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody. Bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.